Hi, so 15/12/2025. This is today's newspaper. Okay, this is today's newspaper, The Hindu. So this is editorial. Okay, so in this editorial, courts must protect, not regulate free speech. Courts must protect, not regulate free speech. Okay, so the freedom of speech is vital for any democracy. The suspect for an attack on the right to free speech is usually the executive or the legislature. However, the proceeding in the Supreme Court, okay, Supreme Court, okay, however, in the Supreme Court, however, the Supreme Court of India in Ranveer Badia versus Union of India and other cases have raised the worry that the potential risks of endangering speech could emerge from the court itself. On November 27, 2025, the court said that self-styled bodies are insufficient for regulation of online content and suggested the creation of neutral, autonomous bodies. It also suggested that the government publish the draft regulatory guidelines and invite comments. Existing laws and regulation. So existing laws and regulation. Okay. The first concern is about the nature of the case under consideration. The bench was dealing with a plea challenging the first information reports at the instance of persons who are accused of improper or absences content. The question of online content regulation was not originally the subject matter of such a case. However, in the earlier proceedings on March 3, 2025, the court said that it would extend the scope of the case to examine the question of what regulatory measures are required to prevent broadcasting which are offensive to well-known moral standards of our society. This expansion of the identifying the is problematic at the outset. Okay, identifying the uh, identifying the problems of content and regulation is something that falls in the legislative domain. In Common Cause of Union of India 2008, the court questioned itself. Apart from the doctrine of separation of powers, courts must realize that there are many problems before the country which courts cannot solve, however much they may like to. When the court takes on this task, it is limited by inherent institutional barriers, including that our technical expertise in the field of online media regulation. The court's substantiality for regulations in the field of also would be vitiated by the same limitations. The second is about the thin line between regulation and lawful restraint. A five-judge bench of the High Court, the court in Sahara India Real Estate Corporation Limited versus others and versus Securities and Exchange Board of India had considered in detail, and the question whether regulation of media content is desirable. Being conscious of the dangers of blanket prohibition, the court held that pre-censorship of the media must be avoided at all costs. In the context of court reporting, it was held that the postponement orders directed at the media must be done only at a stance, etc. Okay, and outlined in the Constitution. Okay, then outline in the Constitution also the grounds based on which the free speech which the free speech is which the an outline in Constitution okay, in Constitution, the grounds based on which the right to free speech can be restricted are laid down by the Constitution in Article 19 Clause 2. This consists of the interests of sovereignty, security of the state, public order, defamation, and others expressly enumerated. The court itself is speaking through the five-judge bench in Kaushal Kishore 2023 held that additional restrictions beyond what is expressly laid down in Article 19.2 could not be imposed. It was categorically held. The grounds lined up in Article 19.2 of restricting the right to free speech are exhaustive under the guise of invoking other fundamental rights or under guise of two fundamental rights staking competing claim against each other. Additional restrictions not found in Article 19.2 cannot be imposed in the exercise of the right of free existence. It is interesting to note that on previous occasions the court has effectively restrained itself from venturing into blanket prohibitory measures. In Adarsh Kumar versus filmmakers to add a disclaimer before the movie, and the court repelled it. It said that it is for the censor board and not for the court to decide it, and even the censor board could decide it only after hearing uh, the producer or the director of the movie. Validity of the laws are to be determined by the court as a constitutional umpire. During the Constituent Assembly debates, Pandit Thakur Das Bhagwan said that the Supreme Court should ultimately be the arbiter and should have the final say in situations of challenging the restrictions on freedom by saying whether the restrictions put are reasonable. Constituent Assembly debates, December 1, 1948. This is the scheme of Article 19 of the Constitution as well. Therefore, a constitutional propriety demands that the court abstains not only from the process of lawmaking but also from the deliberation on the requirement for a law touching the citizens. The case abroad. The court's pervasive demand for further stringent laws in a tricky area could instigate prior censorship or statutory gag. Almost all the major democracies across the world focus on removal of offensive content and penalization in case are breaching the order of removal of content. The Digital Services Act 2022 promulgated the European Union prescribes content removal protocols. The Network Enforcement Act 2017 in Germany ensures prompt action on harmful content without adversely impacting the in online safety. The United Kingdom focuses on removal of harmful content and imposing fine in case of breach. The Online Safety Act 2021 Australia imposes a fine on non-compliance with regulation. Unlike these practices, in democracies, countries such as China and Russia are invoking draconian laws to restrict online content. Surveillance and censorship also dominate the online content regulation in these jurisdictions. Sadly, even some of the democracies which transform into democracies also follow suit. David Landu and Rosalind Dodson in a research paper demonstrated that would-be authorization at times seek to capture codes and deployment abuse etc. When the court repeatedly asks for stringent laws to when the court repeatedly asks for stringent laws to regulate internet content, and when the center readily agrees, it is a serious concern in terms of citizens' freedom. Other Salman Rushdie, when censored, has put it simply: free speech is the whole thing. The whole ball become game. Free speech is life itself. So this is that. So this is another important article, that is the right moment. The right moment to boost India-Ethiopia ties. This is the question. Indian-Ethiopia ties, right? So Okay, Ethiopia, with a population of around 109 million 2024 and one of Africa's fastest growing economies, is of growing strategic and economic interest to major partners including India. Its substantial manufacturing base, large domestic market, and a geographic position in the Horn of Africa make it one of the continent's pivotal states. Despite internal challenges, Ethiopia continues to be viewed as a regional anchor of stability with an effective military and a central role in the evolving politics of a sub-region marked by conflict. It is also the headquarters of the African Union and a potential renewable energy powerhouse, especially in hydropower, positioning it to become an important regional energy exporter. Although landlocked, Ethiopia has traditionally relied on Djibouti for access to the Red Sea. Recent efforts to diversify access through Somaliland and Eritrea underlines its desire to secure strategic autonomy in trade and politics. In trade and politically, the country is emerging from the traumas of a civil conflict and is attempting to build a new national consensus. This regeneration provides an important window for enhancing India, emerging from traumas of a civil conflict and is attempting to build a new national consensus. This regeneration provides an important window for enhancing India-Ethiopia engagement across multiple domains. Deep ties with India. India's relationship with Ethiopia has a deep and long-standing roots. For more than a century, Indian teachers and university professors have formed the backbone of Ethiopia's education system, shaping generations of students and earning enormous respect. Although the number of Indian teachers has declined, Ethiopia's interest in educational collaboration remains high. Ethiopia was the pilot country for the Pan-African E-Network project in 2007 and has maintaining its long-term cooperation with the IIT Delhi for tele-education, demonstrating strong receptivity to modern educational technologies, etc. Today, Ethiopia sends India's highest numbers of African students to India from India, often through African students to India, often through government-funded programs. Remarkably, it has the largest number of PhD students from Africa studying in India. Ethiopia also successfully used graduates from the Pan-African E-Network's master's programs to help staff newly opened universities and academic departments, etc. Expanding this education partnership through digital learning, vocational training and university linkages and new scholarship frameworks. New scholarship frameworks remains one of the most promising avenue for bilateral cooperation. Investment and defense cooperation. Indian investment in Ethiopia is another pillar of the partnership. The Indian business first ventured into Ethiopia in the 1950s, but the real surge came after India extended major lines to credit beginning in 2006. This catalyzed a wave of private investment that surpassed 4 billion. Ethiopian leaders continue to acknowledge the positive developmental impact of Indian investors, particularly at a time when International Monetary Fund conditionalities require the country to mobilize new capital. While earlier investments focused heavily on agriculture, many investors withdrew due to taxation and operational issues. Today, the most promising opportunities lie in mining, especially gold, gold, critical minerals, and rare earth elements, which is an area where Ethiopia has vast but underexplored potential. The Indian Embassy's recent comprehensive mining survey identifies key opportunities while noting regulatory, infrastructural, and logistics constraints that must be addressed. If India can work with Ethiopia Ethiopia to commission and operate selected mines. This could help secure supplies for India's fast-growing renewable energy, battery, and semiconductor sectors. Mining cooperation could become a core element of a strategic economic partnership. Defense cooperation is another promising frontier. Ethiopia was one of the first foreign countries to receive Indian military assistance, beginning with the establishment of the Harar Military Academy in 1956. Since 2009, Indian defense teams have supported the training of Ethiopian forces. After years of demanding internal deployments and operations in Somalia, the Ethiopian military, Ethiopian military and Ethiopian military defense cooperation is another promising. Was the first foreign countries to receive Indian military assistance, beginning with the establishment of the Harar Military Academy in 1956. Since 2009, Indian defense teams have supported the training of Ethiopian forces. After years of demanding internal deployments and operations in Somalia, the Ethiopian military requires fresh training and modern equipment to replace against Soviet-era systems. India, with its competitively priced and battle-tested platforms, is well placed to become a key supplier. A new MOU on defense cooperation and the first meeting of the Joint Defense Cooperation Committee held this year provide an institutional framework for expanding training, capacity building, and defense experts. Ethiopia, which has responsibly repaid earlier India lines of credit under the Indian Development and Economic Assistance okay then program could be considered for a new defense related lines of credit within IMF guidelines. Potential for a new phase. As both countries new phase. As both countries enter new phases of development, and with Ethiopia now a member of BRICS. The moment is ripe to redefine the partnership. Ethiopian officials repeatedly express strong interest in attracting Indian investment, especially in pharmaceuticals, agro processing, light manufacturing, and mining. India could help by updating bilateral agreements such as the double taxation avoidance agreement and the bilateral investment treaty to support private sector engagement. Ethiopia, in turn, needs to address long-standing investor concerns related to foreign exchange availability, taxation approvals, and consistency regulations. The 2,500 strong and influential Indian diaspora represented through the Indian Business Forum continues to highlight foreign exchange accessibility as a key bottleneck. At the multilateral level, expanding cooperation through BRICS, G20 platforms, and South-South frameworks strengthens political convergence, demonstrating success stories of Indian investment within Ethiopia and across Africa could help both countries build wider, etc. So this is another important article, right? Good.